Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi, and this week in my Prince on China column, I went beyond the regular geopolitical chatter around the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well as Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Tianjin, China last weekend and earlier this week. So now the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is done and dusted, as is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's much discussed, much talked about visit to China. But here is one thing: if you thought the buzz was only about geopolitics and policy, not really quiet. So on Chinese social media, people were far more into the optics, the body language, the symbolic moments, and also the memes. And yes, of course, the plenty of jokes were about Donald Trump, primarily the impact of the optics on US President Donald Trump and what the White House is thinking. So, but I think the main point about the visit was that if the SCO summit was a show, and it did become a show, got a lot of attention. Prime Minister Modi was clearly the star of it. He grabbed the most attention online by far, and that was just not limited to China and India, but globally as well. But on the Chinese internet, he was absolutely the star, not just for the optics, but also the approach that he has taken with respect to the US as well as China. But I would say that it is quite unusual that India and its leader officials get so much attention on the Chinese social media, and that too positive attention. And this is exactly what happened when Prime Minister Modi visited Tianjin earlier this week. So a lot of users on the Chinese internet, they pointed out the red carpet rolling out, the red carpet welcome for Prime Minister Modi, the spotless honor of God, the lively dance performances to welcome him. So the idea was that China is actually rolling a red carpet out for Prime Minister Modi. But for many in China, it felt like a message that things between China and India are actually getting back to normal. They're actually warming up. So, but of course, those were the things that were discussed. And even in my last column, I discussed all this. But the real viral moment, what was it? It was Prime Minister Modi holding hands with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Tianjin and then hopping onto his fancy limousine. So those pictures went viral not only in India, but also on the Chinese internet. They blew up on WeChat, Weibo, and a number of other platforms on the Chinese internet. And not just that, hashtags about the hand holding and the car ride attracted millions of views each. So I think that was definitely an unprecedented development with respect to the discourse on India on the Chinese internet. But then there was also a lot of focus on speculating the reaction of the White House and Donald Trump. And in this context, a number of social media users, and that's no surprise, that goes without saying, they joked about how Trump might be fuming, might be reacting to it, watching the Prime Minister Modi bromance bonhomie with Russian President Putin. And in fact, even Hu Shuqin, who is the ex Global Times editor in chief, he pitched in saying that Trump would probably be very, very annoyed after seeing the pictures that are coming out of Tianjin and particularly of Prime Minister Modi and the Russian president. And many saw such symbolism here that Prime Minister Modi skipping his own official car to ride with Putin was a clear nod to India Russia closeness. And then India is not really going to abandon Russia just because US wants it to. But then there was also a lot of discussion about the body language breakdown. And there were a number of platforms such as Douyin, that is the TikTok, the Chinese version of TikTok. There were endless clips zoomed in on Prime Minister Modi's big smile and animated gestures, that how excited he was to be in China. And in fact, some edits even cut in Trump's clip, making it look like that Modi and Putin were inseparable, but Trump is sulking on the sideline. So there were a number of clips projecting that. And on Bibli, that's a popular video platform in China, there were a lot of posts that discussed this, joked about it. But there was one post that joked that Modi actually stole Trump's spotlight because Trump wants to be in the spotlight so much, but it was Modi that stole Trump's spotlight. And if Trump had shown up in China, perhaps he would have been equally popular and his dance moves would have gone viral in China. And of course, there were a number of AI generated clips as well. And there was this particular AI generated clip that attracted my attention that was about a spoof turning Modi and Trump into characters in a Chinese autocratic period drama. And of course, the spoiler alert is that in that AI generated video, Prime Minister Modi won against Donald Trump. So there were a number of videos depicting India's and Modi's win against US and Trump. And of course, this is all very positive and very flattering, but not everyone was gushing about that. There were a number of posts also claimed that Modi's warmth with Putin showed a little bit of weakness and that India would eventually tilt back to the US. But of course, this is more about that perhaps China and Russia should not really trust India blindly. But those takes were in the minority. Those were not really the consensus or majority view on the Chinese internet, surprisingly, of course. And the louder message was that this was Modi's happiest visit in years, foreign visit in years. And this time, that actually showed that India is getting closer to China and it's not going to abandon Russia and it is actually drifting away from the US. So, this was the message that even came out of not only from the geopolitical analysis, but also from the jokes, from the memes, and also the discussion by the ordinary social media users discussing India Prime Minister Modi's visit to China. So, what's interesting here, I would say that is the tone that usually Chinese social media doesn't really paint India in a very positive light. And of course, if you have followed my past Eye on China column, you would realize that most of the commentary, much of the discourse was actually derogatory and very critical of India's policy, and of course, the talks about fence sitting. So, this was something that was missing this time, especially by social media users. And this time, I would say that was actually different in terms of following Chinese discourse on India and Prime Minister Modi's visit to Tianjin. And I would say that if I have to really conclude, if what was the idea that I got from digging into the discussion on the Chinese media and mostly on the internet that Prime Minister Modi actually came across as as independent of the United States, but also at the same time, India has been depicted as close to Russia, but also surprisingly at ease in China. And for now, I feel that this is primarily because in China and for the Chinese discourse, the Chinese social media users, strategic community, and the leadership, the bigger target, both at the strategic level as well as online, is the US, which is why this India Russia camaraderie, as well as the hint of India China stability, all these developments are getting a lot of positive spin on the Chinese internet. So I feel it's more about choosing a bigger adversary, and for China, it is the US. And that was absolutely a rare development in the Chinese discourse as well as discussions on India. But I think for now, India is not an adversarial country. They have to pick a bigger adversary, and that's the US. And in contrast, India is coming across as a friend for the Chinese internet users. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.